All right. Good morning.
Morning.
How are you doing?
Great. That's perfect.
Good.
Yay.
Yay.
Great. Awesome.
Not great.
Wonderful.
That is my point. That proves
On that today.
my silence because I said for maybe 3 seconds and we were like, oh, keep talking, keep talking. All right. So can you go to the first slide? I want to hear a cool story from somebody. Who's got, let's always tell me something good, but I want to hear a cool short story. Who's got one? Anybody have a cool story? I know I'm engaging something.
I'll give you one.
Oh, there's 2 of them. Great.
Maureen. Go, Maureen.
So my middle son has been consistently getting second place in all the cross country meets we're going to. And like there was one where there were 36 teams and he came in second place, right? So before the next meet, my oldest son, who's the captain of the cross country team, sat him down in the morning and he was like, okay, tonight's meet, you got to realize you're not going to get second place because there's going to be X amount of teams. It's going to be a little bit more competitive.
Meaning you're not even going to get in the top 2.
He's like, you kind of have to have like really realistic expectations, right? Like he's giving him this lecture about you have to have realistic expectations. And when we went to the meet that night, he came in first.
That is awesome. People thrive, like, tell me I can't.
Tell me I can't, right?
Then you're going to light a fire that
Yeah.
you are not that person.
Okay, what happened?
Just last week, Kimmy's like, I said 3. I says, how about 5? What do you give? What do you give me? She says. It's like, it's your job.
No, you said a Yeti.
I did say a Yeti afterwards. All right, so we're going to walk through a few things today. My thought process is this is how I look at real estate. I look at it, we have to be knowledgeable and understand the market, not only from an information perspective, but from a context perspective. People have the data that they need ultimately to make decisions, yet the reality is they really don't know how to read into the data to help support the outcomes that they're looking for. So we're going to walk into a little bit of market stats and then talk a little bit about what is truly advocating for your clients. What does that actually look like? And then we'll finish off, if I have enough time, to walk through a value conversation. What's the real value you're bringing to the people that you're working with? So let's jump into just real quickly the first slide. The first 2 slides are from MegaCamp. It's more of a contextual thing just for you guys to understand where we've been in the past. This is something that you can show clients to give them some perspective. And this is also something that I think agents should be aware of, because if you really look at this, it's funny how if you're on the upswing or the downswing, how the same number feels completely opposite. So back in 12, 14, 16, we were all super jacked that we were over 5 million households sold in a year. And now we're all panicking because we're at 5.1. The reality is there's plenty of opportunity and there's still plenty of demand based on what we're seeing in the marketplace. Okay, next slide. This also gives context to sellers. I'm just curious, when you guys see this trend, what do you think your clients think of? What do you think how are they processing that?
This got expensive.
Yeah. So buyer, seller, this looks awesome. Oh, this sucks. And if you have a buyer and seller, if you have one client doing both, they're going to get hit on each side. It's not good or bad. The reality is what I go from here is when you see a spike like this, what is the main thing that's impacted from a buyer's perspective? What's the biggest impact of increased prices? Bigger payment. We're getting into affordability issues. Who's the buyer that drives every other part of the market and every other price point?
First-time home buyer.
First-time home buyer. So if the first-time home buyers are priced out of the market, what happens to every single other market? Second home, luxury, they're all impacted because what happens is people can't actually move out of their second home to get to their third home because there's no first-time home buyers. So the way I look at this is absolutely not sustainable. And if the median price drops Does that mean home prices are depreciating? It doesn't. This is where we want to be careful with context. Certain price points might, luxury might, and that may affect this. But the reality is we've got to look at the data a little bit more with a fine-tooth comb if we're actually seeing if the prices are dropping. I think they're just appreciating less. That's what I've seen. Tim? And if you could talk,
I'm gonna risk getting a little bit nerdy, but I think it's important.
getting? We can do that.
You got me.
You're good.
Yeah, 1-0. First period, don't worry. So the long-term average is useful, but it's not necessarily God-given. Here's what I'm getting at is over several decades, looking backwards, we were in a world where population growth was pretty steady and it wasn't that hard to add housing units and build. Okay. I wouldn't necessarily automatically assume that when you see it go up like that, oh, that's not going to last long and it'll eventually hit that yellow line pretty soon. Because we live in a world where, and I'm sure it's probably a slide you're going to show briefly, but if not, it's, you know, we lost so many new builds in the last 12 years and we're not really catching up. There's no like pipeline. It's a problem. It's fundamentally, you know, a much less supply of homes. So unless all of a sudden the population flattens or something like that, it could be one of those things where we stay on all that for a while just because of that fundamental shit.
Yeah. I'll get a little more nerdy. Sorry. We've got to be careful assuming that population is growing from a younger generation because the reality is it's not. People are living longer. So we have an increasing population, but the truth is people aren't having as many kids. So there is data that supports like there's going to be a peak and then it's going to drop because it's changed.
Well,
So,
I'm going to one-up you.
Okay.
I'm going to add
This
to it.
agenda is
Okay, hang on.
Now.
I'm not going to let us go over. I'm not going to do that. But I will just add to that, to your point. I'm going to use the word bubble, but there could be a little bit of a millennial effect going on right now because the 5-year births, 5-year period of births between 91 and 95, that's the biggest 5-year cohort of births in the US since the baby boomers, and they're right now at prime first-time buyer age. So what happens when they move through that and the dust starts to settle, then we're going to feel an even bigger drop based on what you're talking about with just overall population trends. They're going to ride, they're going to push us for a little bit here, but that's going to go away.
yeah.
Potentially.
And all of this stuff isn't anything to be afraid of. It's just a reality of understanding it and giving context around it. So next slide, Lydia, please. So I want to thank Tim. Tim actually has helped prepare some of these numbers. And what was really interesting is I talked to Tim 3 weeks ago, and he said there's not really anything changing drastically. And in the past 3 weeks, we've seen significant changes. So pending sales is down 23.8, new listings 16.7 in the third quarter. What do those two numbers impact? Pendings are down, but pendings are down more than listings. What's going to happen in the marketplace?
Inventory.
More inventory, right? So we've got to make sure to give context. One of these numbers alone, it matters, but the two together tell a story. So Lydia, when you go to the next one. So this is what Tim called it. It's just as much of an attitudinal shift as it is anything data-driven. Meaning the buyers or sellers are starting to get a little bit of a different opinion of what's going on in the marketplace, whether or not it's validated by the data. So we're up to almost 2 months supply, which we haven't been here in a long time. And it's jumped just in the past week from 1.6 to 1.94.
In how much time?
3 weeks.
Yeah, but September 1, it was similar to August 1.
Yeah, it was just over 1.6. So I don't want to go crazy on the numbers, yet we do have to understand that the trend right now is more and more inventory, which that could impact sellers, could impact buyers. But we've got to take the data as it sits right now to make sure that we actually understand what's happening, and we're not representing our clients just based off of emotions or headlines. This is our job. This is, if we're going to be advisors, this is what we have to understand. Okay. Next slide. So there's two slides here. This is median sales price. You can see where it flattened out in July in June, and then came down a little bit in July. And then next slide, Lydia. It flattened out and it stayed the same in August. So here's my question. What is all of this stuff telling you?
Those sales happened back in June. And so this started.
We're a few months past, right? We're a few months past the candidates. What else, Rick?
Tells us that we're in a great situation because we're moving towards a fair and balanced market.
What
If
does
you guys
that mean to any?
means if you've been in this long enough to have gone through any other shifts, the last 2 years are super fun. I mean, super exciting because we sold lots of stuff, but incredibly difficult, very complicated, lots of problems, lots of issues. Yeah, we killed it, but it was difficult. This, if we do our jobs right, is going to be a little bit of an easier market. Mean you have to work harder to get the business. One of the things that's not on here, we were listening to, what's his name, Arvid?
David Arvid.
David Arvid yesterday. And one of the things that's not on here is there's going to be an absolute mass exodus of realtors. We've seen in 20 years, you know, which means that the realtors that are left are the ones that need to be working very hard to get the business, but then the business itself will be easier to do well.
Yeah. We're going from a service-based market to more of a skills-based market.
Absolutely.
Before we were just servicing clients, just trying to figure out how to service the clients that we had. And now it is going into, we need to be much more skilled in helping advise people what the best decisions are. Because if you go to I think it's either the next slide or two more slides. Yeah, the paradoxes, the one before that. Here's what I believe the truth is. You can make an argument for or against almost anything right now because you can find data to support it. You can say there's super low inventory, so I should get, if you're the seller, I should get over list price. But if the trend is going this way, if I'm a buyer, I'm saying, well, the trend is actually going the opposite direction, so I should be able to get a deal. You have this really interesting paradox of conflicting information that you can justify. Your job isn't to dictate what it is. Your job is to help people make the best decisions. Jacob.
This is very quick. In Florida right now, there is one realtor for every 100 people. There is a population of 22 million in Florida and 220,000 licensed realtors in the state of Florida.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah. So that I think when I was looking at membership statistics over the past like 7 to 10 years, Minnesota has grown from like 16,000 to 22,000, which is a decent growth. Florida's exploded. Like they have 100,000 more agents joining in the past 7-8 years. So Florida especially is going to get a huge exodus. Everywhere over Florida.
There's a retired group that is using it as I need to stay productive and I want to be valuable to people. So there's probably something.
Allows them to write off their cell phone.
Perhaps. Nothing crazy in here, but just a note, obviously near a two-year high in inventory, yet still significantly lower than what we would consider to be a balanced market. Rates, we all know what's happened with that. It seems like there's some stability in this. That doesn't mean there was going to be stability tomorrow or next week. This is interesting. The inspections, obviously, the amount of people that are waiving inspections, that number is changing now. All of these things we've got to prep our clients for if we're going to be advocates for our clients. We've got to, our sellers can't expect multiple offers in one weekend with no inspection contingencies anymore. I'll say certain areas, you could probably still see that. But in general, when we look at, when we have our brokers kind of doing all the compliance review, there's a significant jump in the inspections that are being written into the purchase agreements. So just data for you to be prepared about. Next slide. So we kind of just talked a little bit about that. I'm actually going to move past this. You can go to off of the PowerPoint now. And let's just talk a little bit about some of the stuff that we just went through. As we move into a shifting market, I look at two things that we really need to pay attention to as agents. One of them is we need to increase our knowledge with regards to the marketplace and understand with context what all those numbers mean. And I keep hammering the context because we're used to going so fast, assuming a one number means one thing for sure. One number can mean 3 or 4 or 5 different things. So we've got to use that number in reference to other numbers to actually create the story that makes sense for people to make best decisions. Make sense? Second one is your activities. Rick already said it. When the market shifts, we have to shift how we show up as well. And if you guys follow me at all on social media, you know my perspective is long-term. I think long-term in everything. A short-term perspective is going to cause us to show up with an agenda, which doesn't always put the client first. So if we're strictly going to be transactional, it concerns me a little bit because the reality is you might have a good year, but you're going to suffer long-term if you're not treating it as this is going to be a repeating client over a period of time. So knowledge and activities, we really need to dive into what we want that to look like. So when I look at big markers up here. So I don't know, Lydia, if you can zoom in or not. I look at this we have choices in 3 ways. So you have where you are, and then you have a goal. That's just a flag. It's not a P, it's a flag. Not graded drawing. So this box is intention without any action. Nothing's going to change here. So as you look into 2023, which by the way, that's a shameless plug. Business Planning Clinic in October 13th. You should promote it. You already.
October 13th.
She's like, I just did. The second one can be this. That is action without any intention or any goal or anything that you're actually shooting towards. Was somebody talking on the screen, Lydia?
I think maybe it sounds.
Okay. And then, well, it's not actually like that. It's more like that. So you have, some people can't see it, but you have where you are and your intention. At least you know and you're working with action. At least you know where you're going, right? So when you look at 2023, I would advise you to not take the same way business came this year into next year. I would increase the amount of conversations that you're going to have.
Excited to call expireds again.
You are.
Yeah.
He's like, so you're saying there's a chance. So, let's see what I missed here. One thing I wrote down is those that don't want to be salesy, focus on value and long-term perspective. I hear a lot of people, I don't want to be salesy. The only reason you're salesy is because you're not bringing enough value. Sorry. The only reason you're salesy is because you're not bringing enough value.
We are salespeople.
We are
We are
salesy.
salespeople.
100%.
Well, I think sometimes we want to be like, oh, I don't want to be salesy. Well, okay. And when I'm working with other professionals, I don't want to be sold. I want to be educated. But my job is to sell houses. Like if you ask my seller what my job is, it's to get their house sold. So I think we shouldn't be afraid or ashamed of being salespeople. We should be educating also.
I'm saying let's be salespeople. Let's not be salesy.
Yes, I agree.
That's where I'm leaning towards, because a great salesperson does what? They add value, but they understand the need of the client and they find somebody that wants that need and they both find a win.
And that's sales. That's good.
That is sales. But the perspective of most is I just gotta go sell more stuff, even if it doesn't match up. So this actually leads me into advocating for your clients. Okay, let's do a little just open forum, and if you're online, punch it in the chat or talk. Lydia, let me know. Why do people move?
Life change.
So job change, okay, what else? Married,
Divorced.
marriage, divorce,
Retirement.
Death.
what else?
Few kids.
Kids.
Death. Kids left for college. Death.
Hello, acknowledge the death.
The reality. Empty nesters, what else?
Downsizing.
Downsizing. What else? I was kind of looking at, I'll put that in with kids.
Health.
You good with that?
Health issues.
Health? Okay.
Lifestyle change.
Cool.
Oh, that was,
Keep going.
no, I just did there. You guys, there. Nailed it. Hairstyles, yeah. You moved because of that.
Mark all over my idea.
This is not going to
I lost my hairline, I got it sewn.
this is completely derailing it. Okay, what else? Say that again?
Happy in their lives, he said.
That's deep. That's deep. I don't know how to write that.
I move every 3-4 years.
I get it. I don't know how to write it without it being insulting, so just gonna leave it.
issues.
Keep it up.
Unstable, mentally.
How about schools?
Move their kids to a different school.
New job or job transfer?
Got a job up there?
Investment wise though.
There we go. We got
For
invest.
investment purposes, every 3 years.
They want to
I'm
spend.
gonna write down financial.
They want to spend more time with their realtor.
I'm gonna call that kind of a nuance.
One-off.
If they can't hang with us outside of that, well. So, this is a kind of an opinion for me. So, which one of these do we assume is one of the biggest reasons that when you really get down to it is not? Well, it's still a reason, but it's not the main reason. Not a trick question.
That's financially and money.
When we talk about why people move, that is never the driver. Now, I can't say never. Sometimes it's the driver. Yet the reality is if it's not coupled with anything else, there's very, very few people that are going to move quickly for financial reasons, unless they have to, right? Room for the kids is way more important than trying to capitalize on selling your house, if you're happy and you enjoy where you're at.
The script that I always use with my friends, and my goal, I'm always concerned about being salesy, so I'm always trying to phrase it carefully, is personal circumstances almost always trump financial circumstances or state of the market. That's always how I phrase it to them, just because, and that's how I make myself feel good and not feel like I'm being salesy. It's just like, whatever, man, whatever makes you feel good. I want to make sure you're taken care of.
That's it.
Easy script to use.
And I'm, again, don't get me wrong. This is not never, it's not a never. Sometimes people do make this decision. But the reality is everything, I could take the past 12 months. Educating people on the financial side is critically important. And if I look at how when we're talking value to our clients, I look at agents on social media. This is 80% of the things that put out there has to do with financials. Does that make sense? I'm just wondering if we're missing the mark on creating perspective and initiating conversations with people by just making it financial. Because we can propose and offer suggestions if they're running into any of this in their life, that we should talk about what it could look like if any of these are actually part of your motivation. But we automatically go to interest rates, we go to appreciation. Because the reality is, we talked about it before, if somebody actually sells and buys in this market, your message conflicts with one side of those. I don't know if you guys like me right now. If there's a huge financial upside to sell because prices are they're just soaring. I say the seller to buy.
Because it helps.
So I had it right. Okay.
Yeah.
If they buy in the same market, they're getting the opposite side of that. It doesn't make it a wrong decision. It could still be a very good decision. But the pitch that we're saying is sell your house because you've appreciated dramatically. Amy's wants to counter me right now, and I'm open for it. You don't hide things very well. And again, I don't want to get into absolutes. There's nuances to all of this.
People make decisions based on emotions, right? And there's no
What's
emotion.
this?
There's very little, at least.
Unless you're in a pain point, this is not your emotional decision-making process.
And even in a pain point, when you go back to the really fun times of 2008, in the meetings with the clients, the financial duress that they were in at that time was the actual reason, was the behind the scenes reason for moving. But you are exactly accurate in that it was never not accompanied by something more significant in their family. Because that move and that financial drop took their kids out of private school that they've been at for the last 4 years, had their kids watch the car be, taken from the driveway when it was repoed, just the number of things that went into the family. So that it was, even though the finances were there, that wasn't the reason for that moving. So I agree with this 100%.
What I would suggest is I take all of these and then just couple it with that one. This is always part of the conversation. So I think we can bring more value when we bring a holistic picture to decision-making processes and the benefits of moving or not moving. Okay. Now, this is a trick question. I'll just let you know on the front end. When's the best time to buy or sell?
20 years.
What exactly?
Look at this. Oh, you got it now. 20 years ago, what?
But that's a famous Japanese saying. When is the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. When is the next best time to plant a tree? Today.
Okay.
So when's the best time to move? 20 years ago. When's the next best time? Today.
Well, I'm going to hold on to that.
People always ask that, every listing of well, when's a good time? I said, when your life's ready.
Yeah, when you're ready.
I say that every time.
So
Again,
But you're never ready.
when your life's ready for it.
Yeah, when you feel your life's ready for it. Because if you force someone and they're not ready emotionally, it's gonna be in the ass for you.
yeah, and it's going to be super. I don't know if this is the right. So here's my second question. How do you know? You don't. Thank
Kind
you.
of do though. The client
When
does.
you talk to
If
them.
they ask me when's a good time
I
to
was
sell,
asking you
I would
guys.
say to them,
I was asking
you'll
you
know
guys.
when you know that you need to move. That's when it's time.
What Shane said.
Right.
Yeah.
But this idea that our automatic answer is now.
Yeah.
I don't think that's right, guys. You might get a sale out of it, but I don't think it's right. And this is where I really think about short-term, long-term. Because I want you to think about a situation where somebody says, I think I want to buy, and you walk through and their situation doesn't make sense. And you provide insight like, I don't know if right now is the best time for you. You have a client for life. And if you don't, you saved yourself a headache, most likely.
It's sort of like that contractor that comes over to give you an estimate on replacing your furnace and tells you don't need to replace this.
Yeah, you will, because it takes that one point of contact of saying, okay, he just didn't go for the deal. He probably could have got me. right? Right?
I have a friend going through a divorce right now and she keeps sending me texts saying,
Probably a good time to buy.
well, she keeps sending me texts saying if we have to sell, you know, I'm gonna want to use you. Her ex-husband doesn't want to use me. She keeps saying she wants to use. I keep texting her back. I think you should try to keep the house. She's got 4 kids. She's got small little house out in Watertown. I don't see her being able to buy higher right like as her friend and not being salesy. I didn't see it as an opportunity to dive in and go, I'm going to push her to try to do this right now. And she was surprised that every single time she's reached out to me, I've said, I think you should try to keep the house. But I feel like in the long run, that's going to mean more.
Doing the right thing is always the right thing, and you'll win long term. You just have to have enough patience. And I'll also say, maybe you think she should hold on to it, but if you haven't asked enough questions for her to get there. Because us telling somebody, they're not going to do what we tell them to do unless they decide that they're actually going to do it. So what I would encourage in any situation, for whatever reason somebody is, let's really talk about, let's sure, like, does this make sense to you? And that requires communication and great question asking and not a safe conversation.
So just real quick, in a similar vein, I'm sharing this because I bet a lot of you in this room, if you haven't already, are going to get this question. It'll help you prepare for it, because I wasn't prepared for it, but luckily I responded the right way. I had a buyer ask me, what if we keep our house and rent it out? What would that look like? I without hesitating looked at her and I said, I think you'd have a great house to have as a rental property. And I ticked off all the reasons why. I mean, I hope that builds trust, but you guys might get that question too. And funny enough, a week later, I had it happen again, and I came with the exact same reply. So it was just lucky the first time. I was just being authentic, and but I mean, even hesitating on that would almost be kind of a missed opportunity, or but to be able to respond that quickly and that affirmatively to her, I gotta believe that's powerful.
But I'll also say, do we know if that's the right thing for them? Because do they understand what they're actually getting into?
Right. Well, we got there too, but I mean, the initial response, if you stutter and then you start talking about why it wouldn't be a good idea, that's risky. I mean, people are going to wonder where that's coming from. But I started out with, I think you have a great house based on what you paid for it, what your rate was, where it's located, what it has to offer, some of the shortcomings of the house were things that maybe on a sale might be a little more difficult, but I thought renters would overlook. So just, all that.
So all the logical stuff makes sense, but are they prepared emotionally?
Right.
And that's where we've got to help them understand what it looks like, or give them the resources to make it a good experience to rent it. I love that.
Just a quick note. I think that there is an incredibly simple yet critical way that we can avoid being salesy. And this is it. It's very simple. When you're having a conversation, if it is about you, you are salesy. When you're having a conversation, if it is about them, you are a salesperson. And here's the difference. Before you have that conversation, ask yourself, what I'm about to say, is this about me getting this listing? Is this about me wrapping this up and selling it now this fall because we've had a slower year? Is this about me, or is it about them? And stop yourself if it is about you, because it will be obvious to them. And that's when you run the risk of being salesy. It's very simple, but it is critical. So if you just ask that question before you speak, it'll change a lot of your language of sales.
Great point. Really great point.
I was just gonna say, don't let the pain of lack right now deter you from future gain. And I think that's really hard, especially as new realtors get into it and are like, I just need something right now. But like to explain, going back and realizing, if you make this about you, it's not about value anymore. And it's purely transactional, and that's not the agent. I think everybody here signed up to be.
I would agree with that 100%.
Jake, can you echo that? Because I couldn't hear it very well, and I wonder if you
Well,
want
basically saying, don't let the current status of lack
For you from future gain.
deter you from doing the right thing now. So I sometimes things just come to you. This just came to me. It says, when you become a true advocate, you put the goals, aspirations, and opportunities of the clients ahead of your own. And when you do that, you build trust. And when you build trust, what do you get? Referrals. When you get referrals, what does your business look like?
Expansive.
A lot more stable when you can operate that way. So I want you to just think about how all that stuff stacks on top of itself, because it does. I've said this over and over. It's like you show up every single day, every morning, every week, you get punched in the mouth, you go do it again, you work on the weekends, and then in 10 years, you're an overnight success. That's how this business works. That's what the perception is, but the reality is it's the grind all the way through. And when I say grind, it's just consistency. Why do we work with clients we don't like?
Well, the clients,
We don't have enough business. It's the only reason. If you had more business, you'd be like, we're not a good fit. I don't think this works. Let me refer you to Tim. Tim would be like, yeah, this is definitely not going to work.
He'll be great at helping you get your Brian went to.
I call a timeout.
Time out.
Goalie change.
Right. So let's talk quickly about tactical.
Before you, Jake, before you
Go ahead.
go on, can I just express appreciation for this conversation? Because I think it's something that we really need to process and internalize as agents, to have these kinds of tough conversations. When people ask you point blank, what should I do? It's so important to have an informed answer and not speak off the cuff, because it's critical to give the right information first and not talk out of your butt. That's my
You just gave me permission to swear.
I did not ask for permission, so I did not.
Well, I think twofold. We going back to, we have to have the knowledge and the context, and we also have to ask questions. What should I do is not something for me to answer. It's for something me to ask enough questions that you just come to your own solution. As soon as I tell you what to do, guess what? Who's liable?
You.
My fault. Anything goes wrong, my fault. Their decision, maybe our fault. It'll still be, but the relationship hopefully will be a little bit better.
Right.
So as we get into this market, I want you to, I just based on all of the rooms I've been in, like 70 to 80% of the realtors in the business right now were not in the business in 2008. So there's a new skill set that we're going to need if we're talking price reductions, if we're talking expires, if we're talking, there's a new skill set and a new conversation that we have to develop and learn when we go into a listing. Hey, trust me, when a house stays on the market for 6 months, my philosophy was I serviced all my listings on Friday. Every single one of them got a phone call on Friday, even if there wasn't any showings or updates, because back then you could go 3 weeks without a single showing. I'm still calling the seller saying, hey, nothing's changed, but I think we should talk. Because they're looking for me to be an advocate. And if they only want me to talk to them when something's good, I'm not actually being an advocate. It's the whole conversation. Like if I'm telling you something difficult, you know I'm telling you the truth. Because I wouldn't want to just tell you something difficult if it wasn't the truth. So we've got to be prepared to have these conversations and set proper expectations with the clients.
You know, I think you can give your opinion on a situation without giving advice.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
Tell me more about
Because
that. I think that's good.
when it comes up, I will tell people that if it were for me, I would choose this, and this is why I would choose that. Versus, yeah, that's a great decision for you because it makes sense. This, and this. Versus just laying it out and say, for me, so that I'm not putting my decision on them. Just giving them my opinion, which they're coming to us for our opinion, right?
I absolutely think there's a space for that. I would agree on it. And the reasons why I think is more important than the answer itself, because that helps them kind of personalize it for them. Well, my situation is similar to yours, so I think that actually relates and makes sense. So that's a really good point. I like that. Okay, so there's 2 areas I can go. I can go into what value are you actually bringing to your clients, or I can walk into how how you're evaluating your decision-making process with regards to building your business.
Is it choose your own adventure?
A little bit of both.
Yeah.
Want to raise hands?
Want me to do both and do it very poorly for each one? Let's do
No,
that.
no.
Totally. can't-
What's your options again?
Value to your-
I'm actually gonna fly through the value you're bringing, and then I'm gonna get to the decision-making process stuff. Okay, all right,
You're already going before.
I am gonna do both of them awesomely. Thank you. So I wanna ask the question, what value are you actually bringing to clients? If you were to say, what value are we bringing to clients, what do you say?
You're educating them.
Okay. Okay. Market data, perspective,
Guidance, advocacy.
Experience.
opening doors. There is a value in that. Nobody said
Electronic clock.
find the house on the MLS.
Yeah.
Nobody said that yet.
Doing so well.
Okay. What else?
Representing them when talking about users.
Okay. Advocating on their behalf. Okay.
Negotiating on their behalf.
Negotiating. Absolutely.
I would never tell them this, but psychologically helping.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I think you can tell them that too. I put emotional stability.
Emotional.
Well, because the reality is these are emotional sometimes. And if we get into the emotion, if I can encourage anybody in this room to make sure that you're keeping a safe distance away from getting into the emotions with them. You can empathize with them, but I'm going to caution you on getting into that same boat with them. Because you've lost your ability to offer guidance at that point if you counter what they're thinking. We're on their side. We can be empathetic to how they're feeling. And they're still counting on us to be the stable force that's helping make good decisions. Right? Because if your financial planner rode the market, like some of us do, I don't want that financial planner. Because every time it goes up, I'm going to waste a bunch of money buying towards the top, and every time it starts to crash, I'll probably hit it at the bottom. So we need advocacy that provides some emotional stability that gives us logic. Okay. So now I want to ask the question:
Do you want to do any showings with
who can you
Kendall?
bring that value to every day?
I can do tomorrow. He's available in morning up until 4 tomorrow. I just figured if you do get split on that one, since it's still up, I don't mind.
Anyone, let's not go through them.
Tomorrow.
You can bring that.
I do-
Can you meet them? As Dan Winters.
Where are they? All Minneapolis and
Must have been great, huh, Dan?
just.
So the idea of it is, are we intentional around
Yeah.
what you, what we think?
But he's only
saying
at free till 4.
And are we delivering that?
Okay. Morning through. Okay. Is he quick in homes? Not quick in homes.
I can tell he didn't hear me either.
I think we have a great opportunity now. I'm very excited to have houses on the market for 3 to 5 weeks because we can bring that skill set to a whole new group of people that we haven't been able to do the last 2 years. The last 2 years has been our clients alone.
Yep.
A lot of clients really fast, lots of service, but not a lot of attention and sharing all of our skills. Now that we're doing open houses and we're meeting new people and we're marketing to the neighborhoods, we have time to do that. We need to shift our mindset back to what that looks like and being on spot all the time when you're doing those events because you want to bring your value proposition to the table, right? But there's a great opportunity now to go back to exposing yourself to
Yeah, just keep going. Keep going. You stopped at the wrong time.
Exposing your skill set
There
that you
go.
have to lots of different people.
Yeah. And that takes intention. So my point around that is, are we intentional around all the value that we can bring to our clients? I had a conversation with an agent last week, and he's been struggling a little bit with regards to kind of lost some of that. Why am I doing this? And super talented guy. He's run teams. He's done big things. And what what we got around to is we've got to reframe the value that we're bringing to clients. Because if we don't think we're bringing value to clients, the business isn't fun anymore. If we're not valuable to somebody, it doesn't feel as fulfilling. So we literally reframed it in a sense that you have something significant that people need, and you're looking at it as just helping people buy houses. We've got to get to the human element. So I'm going to fly through these real quick. So if we're going to be valuable to people, we got to be intentional about a handful of things. One of them is preparing the right questions to ask people. If we're not prepared to ask effective questions in meetings, we're not going to get the necessary information out to be able to guide them based on what their needs and desires are. Okay. Second one is we've got to start thinking about anticipating feelings. I know it's touchy-feely, but the reality is if we're going into a different market, they're going to experience different emotions. And we've got to anticipate some of that so we can actually let them know it's very normal. Like if you stay on the market a little bit longer right now, I got your back. I know you might feel a little bit anxious and you might wonder what's going on. That's normal. But we've got to help anticipate and normalize that. Okay. You need to be emotionally prepared. We need to prepare ourselves emotionally to go into these conversations. That's where the stability comes in. Yeah.
Dealing with the emotions of the clients and handling our own emotions feels like a really good opportunity for something to blow out on another team meeting. Just
Not to fly through it.
Yeah.
I would agree
Flying
with
through it
that.
is great, but I think we could go deeper on that. I think it's of the moment. It would be wonderful if you're looking for ideas for something like that.
I 100% agree with you. You know what I'm afraid of?
People getting too emotional.
No. Well, yes, I'm always afraid of that. Yes. I'm afraid people minimize it. So if I held a meeting like this, I'm afraid a certain segment of the agent base is going to say that's not that important.
Is that about you or about us and what we need?
I feel like we should assume that.
2-2.
I think it's 3.
I think it's 3.
Good point.
You can hit me later.
I think it's super valid. I just think we all have different personality profiles and we minimize or maximize something based on the comfort that we feel in it. So if I can just encourage everybody, this emotional side of the business is what makes you the best. I can talk through numbers, but I'm telling you, when you can connect with somebody and emotionally engage in them and understand or at least be empathetic to how they're feeling, that service is what's missing today.
Disagree.
But it even goes beyond empathy and compassion. Like it's about not only just understanding what they're feeling, but how can you help them?
Right?
Right.
You can't help somebody
There is a
through it if
difference
they're
there.
emotionally stuck and you're not helping them through that. You can't fix something.
I am not the person who is the most comfortable with numbers, but I have to know the numbers in order to really represent my people.
Without
And
question.
it's the same if you're really more comfortable with the numbers, you have to have that emotional component or you're not helping them. Because I wrote down that the finances are not the reason that people are actually moving. So if the reason that they're actually moving is something that's really personal, we have to be ready to be really personal.
Because if you don't get that way, if you don't understand that part of it, they're going to judge your service level off of it.
They're gonna find someone who will.
Or they'll find somebody, and sometimes they may not want you to go there, guys. They may not want to answer some of the questions that you're asking, but the reality is, if you're going to have a good transaction, you're going to have to. What is your service based off? What is how does somebody judge the service level you provide them? You
Expectations.
set the expectations and then you deliver on those expectations. That's really what they're gauging it on. So if we're not setting expectations on the front end, we're leaving this whole array of the idea of what they think it's going to look like and feel like on them. And then you're gonna have to address it after it goes sideways. So on the front end, we just gotta be prepared to set proper expectations, even when they're difficult conversations. The last month or the month before, I talked with one of our brokers and she said, I'm getting a lot more calls from clients saying they're not happy with their agents. And you know what the weird thing is? It's because they weren't selling it in a weekend or two. They're upset because the house didn't sell in the weekend. Okay, were their expectations not in alignment with what's happening in the marketplace based on where they listed it? Something's off, right? So it's really important. You actually protect yourself by setting the proper expectations, and you give yourself the best chance to get referrals from that too. Okay? When you're wrong, admit it.
I made that mistake and said, we price it here and this is the last month.
Yep.
Um,
What else can you say? Yep, I was wrong. Yeah, because they know
we
it.
have fun with it. Don't just sit there and wait for them to fester. Just say it right away.
People always know, right? So if you don't acknowledge it, they also know that you're not acknowledging it. So it's a great point, Shane. Last one is be prepared to listen. Not listen based on your agenda, but listen on what they're actually telling you. Because if it's shifted to your perspective or your agenda, you're not listening in a way that's actually going to serve the client. So take your preferences off the table and just hear what they're actually saying and dig into it. Okay. Okay, we're going to move on to decision making. We got 5 minutes. Okay. I look at decision making as an integral piece of something that's overlooked. I'm going to put it that way. I think we overlook our process of decision making and we leave it up to emotions. But what I've learned in my life is that delayed gratification, and you take that into account in your decision making process, gives you the best life you could possibly have. So I'm curious, when you guys were growing up, this is really interesting. I think it is. When you had dinner and you had like 2 or 3 things on your plate, and you had one thing that you loved and one thing you didn't like, which one did you eat first?
I didn't like.
Did not like. Lots of.
I ate the one that I liked first.
Yeah, I was waiting. It's usually split.
I would eat the one I liked, so that was the last bite.
Yeah, I ate it, I what you like, and then you go to what you don't like, but you don't want to end up.
I don't eat the things.
Sandwich it.
Trash.
As a kid, I didn't. Now you do.
Or you pretend to eat it, you spit it out your napkin. Did anybody do that?
It's funny, guys. Every time I bring up this conversation, it always goes sideways. Like, no, eat the best thing first. No, I couldn't finish the bad things because I would gag. And it only took one time for my dad to make me stay at the table for about an hour and a half, and I realized I wasn't getting out of it, that I was never going to eat the worst thing last.
Now, beer has to be different. That's beer first. There's a reason for that.
By the end, you don't care, right? So it's kind of joking, but I look at this. If you've read the book Principles with Ray Dalio, it's a thick book, and I got through it, and I'm a slow reader, so you can do it. But he talked about first, second, and third order consequences in decision-making process. And that ideally, what the basic premise is, the decisions that you make that are maybe not the most comfortable in the first order consequence, meaning the first thing that you have to decide. So let's just say fitness. Not everybody wants to go to the gym because it's painful, tired, all of that stuff. Yet, what's the second order consequence of being able to go? What's the outcome of the second outcome of going to the gym? Shredded.
Long term, you might be feeling better when you're 70 or 80.
You're healthier. You're stronger.
If your wife is a personal trainer, you have different consequences for not going to the gym.
That could be like a punishment, it sounds like. So, but you become more fit by doing it, right? So my goal in bringing this up is, I think it's really important that we're evaluating our decisions based on what we ultimately want long-term, not how we feel in the moment. What do we all struggle with to do every single day or consistently enough? Lead generate, right? Or is that just me? It's just me?
No, it's not just you.
Why? Why is that the case? When we know we need to do it, right? If we're going to build a business, we know we need to somehow develop more relationships to be in contact with more people to give us the best chance. Why don't we do it consistently? It's your best, it's Jacob's special.
Don't trash it, man.
It's not instant gratification. We're not getting, this is not a 50-50 business. I'm going to put in the time and I'm going to get paid. It's not how this business works. I've talked to plenty of people that say, I've been working 11 hours a day. I said, what are you doing? For 11 hours a day, what are you doing? And if it's not lead generating, I don't care how many hours you put in because it's not going to do anything for you. Just hustle. Hustle all you want. Hustling for no reason without any intention is not actually going to do anything. So I might get a little bit straightforward on this, but the reality is I can't underestimate the importance of making the best decision that actually is what's going to get you what you want long term versus how you feel today. It's not that I don't care how you feel. I don't care how you feel in the moment if you made a commitment that you want your life to be better tomorrow than it is today. I care more about that than I do about your comfort right now.
I always think too, the lead gen looks like what you want it to look like, right? I mean, there's a million ways to lead gen. You don't have to cold call all day long. You can hand out 30 business cards in a day to random people on the street.
It's kind of why I went to the value. You'll do the work if you actually believe you have something of value to bring to somebody.
What makes you feel good?
Good. Like you guys realize how big of an impact we can have on the wealth of all of our clientele? If we just ask them, hey, have you ever thought about just an investment property? No, I would hate rental properties. Tell me more about that. Yeah. Well, you got to do this, this, and this. If I could provide a resource for you, would it matter? No, that'd be great. If we can find a product, like I'm thinking long-term. Do we realize the impact of that over somebody's long-term wealth building? I think we have a little bit of an obligation to actually, I don't care if they choose to or not. I want to make sure they have the information. You can call people all day and just ask that one question. And maybe 1 out of 50 would say, yeah, tell me about it. Cool. 1 out of 50, better than 0. Does that make sense? So I wrote down impulse is the enemy of long-term consistency and compounding success. Impulse is the enemy of long-term consistency and compounding success. I think everybody in this room would agree with this. Most people think that they are striving to get things like toys, houses. Shane, like you said, I'm moving every 3 years. I got to move up. Money that they think will make them happy. But the reality is none of those things will supply anywhere near the happiness and fulfillment that you get from growing yourself. So the framework that we're using to lead generate matters tremendously because to Rick's point, if we're thinking about us, we're not calling anybody. Or we're calling with a very, very flat value proposition. So my encouragement is look past the current part of the decision and ask yourself, if I do this, does it line up with what I want to accomplish? Or how I want to feel physically? Or I always use health because it's such a delayed gratification game with health. You can do all the right things for so long, and it just takes time for the body to adapt.
Especially the older you get.
The old, trust me, I'm not old.
I'm not either, but I'm just saying, the older you get.
The older you get, it gets tougher. Yeah. So one example, and then we'll get moving. Kind of to overlisting property. We talked about that. Let's take this in guiding our clients. If a client wants to price their property over what you think the value is. Do they understand the first, second, third order consequences of doing that? Meaning we could do that. And I want you to think about if you're on the market for 30 days in this market at a price point of $450, let's just say that. People are going to start looking at your property with a cautious eye. What's going on? Why isn't that sold yet? What happens now is you're going to have a consequence of having to negotiate differently because you chose to list on the high end right now. My recommendation is let's be where the market is, let's be a little bit more aggressive and make sure that we don't leave space for that to happen. Does that make sense? So it's not only for how we make decisions, but can we help guide our clients rather than telling them, no, you shouldn't list there. Just say, okay, if we listed there, here's what could happen. How do you feel about that at the end of 30 days or 60 days? And what you'll notice is you're actually guiding them into making the best decision of listing it at what you're probably recommending. But you're not telling them to do it. You're getting them to self-discover to make that decision. And again, then it's their decision. Does that make sense? So, thoughts? Questions? So deep, you just don't have anything left, right?
One perspective I've always had since as many of you may know, I'm very young, 24. One perspective I've always had trying to be an entrepreneur early on in my life is I'm trying to build a foundation for the rest of my life to be great and amazing. And as I've gotten a little bit older, I've realized that, oh, that never stops. And I don't think I'm ever going to stop feeling like I'm building a foundation. And I think that's a really helpful way of looking at long-term goals. And I didn't just in the past couple of years, I've realized oh, I should probably stop doing the foundation thing. And then I think, no, this is great. This is going really well. I still have a lot of work to do, but I think it helps me to think that I'm always building to another place. So that might be helpful for someone.
Anything else? I'm going to leave you with this then. Recognize that the biggest threat to good decision making is harmful emotions. Very difficult to make really good decisions with harmful emotions. So check yourself. Make sure you're in the right headspace.
Harmful emotions? Did you read that somewhere? I just want to make sure that there's credit to.
Katie's now in the
If I say Jake said it.
Right when Jamie said that, everybody started going off too. I don't have anything after that, so I'm going to say it's fine.
Okay, that's a weird question.
Love it. Most of the stuff I regurgitate, it's fine.
So it took you 59 minutes into this meeting before you finally said something that was worth putting up.
Hey, that's why it's worth staying until the end, guys.
Just got the W.
All right, you good?
We're done.
Thanks for being here, gang. Appreciate you guys. Have an awesome day.
Oh, I miss you.